Imagine boarding a flight, settling into your business class seat after a long day of work, expecting a moment of peace. But suddenly, a flight attendant tells you that you don't belong there, that your seat is reserved for someone else. What would you do? Would you raise your voice? Would you fight back? Or would you sit quietly, knowing the power you hold is far greater than any argument? This is the story of Elijah Mercer, a calm and powerful black CEO who faced this exact moment on Flight SB317, wrongfully removed from his seat due to assumptions and bias. Elijah's response didn't come with anger or shouting. Instead, it came with quiet authority, a presence that shifted the entire flight, and eventually the whole airline. Who is Elijah Mercer? Why didn't he argue, and how did just 6 minutes change everything for the flight attendant who challenged him? Stay with us, because this isn't just a story about one man's seat. It's about dignity, justice, and the silent strength that demands respect. If you believe in standing tall with quiet power, hit like, share this video with someone who needs it, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories that inspire and awaken. Elijah Mercer didn't like flying, but he respected the quiet. He liked how the world hushed inside a cabin, no ringing phones, no boardrooms, no sudden calls asking for a signature that would move millions. It was the one place where his influence didn't trail behind him like a shadow. Today, he flew alone, no assistant, no black car, just him, a slim leather bag, and a seat booked under the name E. Mercer. He boarded early with Group 1, walking past rows of murmuring travelers. He moved slowly, deliberately, wearing a gray wool coat with a collar turned slightly up and a vintage gold timepiece just visible on his wrist. Nothing flashy, nothing loud, just intentional. Seat 2C, business class. He placed his leather bag beneath the seat, eased into the cushion, and took out his notebook, the kind with real pages and a worn spine. He clicked open a black pen, paused, and began writing something that only made sense to him. A few rows behind, the cabin buzzed with the usual shuffle of boarding. That was when Trevor Kane entered. Crisp navy blazer, designer watch, loud voice, he scanned the rows, briefcase in hand, and froze. His eyebrows raised not in confusion, but offense. "You gotta be kidding me," he muttered. Elijah looked up, just once, and then back down to his notebook. Calm, unbothered. Trevor stepped forward. "Excuse me, I believe you're in the wrong seat." Elijah didn't respond. Not right away. He wrote the final word of his sentence, clicked his pen, and set it gently on the tray. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," he said evenly. Trevor scoffed, turning around. "Kendra, we've got someone sitting in the wrong section here." Kendra Lowell appeared almost instantly, like she had been waiting for a reason to step in. Blonde hair tied in a tight twist, a professional smile glued to her lips, and a badge clipped neatly at her waist. "Sir," she began. Tone, friendly but hollow. "Business class seating starts at row 2. Economy will board from the rear shortly." Elijah lifted his eyes, looked at her, just looked, not a glare, not defiance, just calm. "This is my seat," he said. 2C. Kendra's smile didn't waver, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "I understand, but sometimes these tickets can be confusing. Do you have your boarding pass with you without a word?" Elijah reached into the inside pocket of his coat and handed it to her. She read it, then read it again. Something in her jaw twitched. Still, she kept smiling. "Okay, it appears valid, but we've had some misprints today. I'll just double-check with the gate." She tapped her comms device. "Gate staff, this is Led Lowell on SB 317. I've got a possible miscode on 2C. Passenger presenting business ticket, but manifest hasn't synced." Elijah didn't blink, didn't fidget, just retrieved his pen and set it gently on top of his notebook. Kendra turned back to Trevor. "Sorry about the delay, sir. We'll have it sorted in a moment." Trevor gave Elijah a smug look, then placed his bag in the overhead. He didn't sit, just stood over Elijah with that slight lean forward the kind people use when they think you should move. Kendra returned her gaze to Elijah. "While we wait, would you mind stepping to the front galley? It won't take long. Just need to clear the manifest sync." Elijah remained seated. There was a silence. Then he slowly closed his notebook, slid his pen into its loop, picked up his bag, and stood. He didn't sigh. He didn't protest. But as he stepped into the aisle, the cabin felt like it had inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. A teenage girl in 4A nudged her friend. "Did you see that they just moved him without even confirming?" Another woman across the aisle whispered to her husband, "I think he's the only black man in this section." In the front galley, Elijah stood still, not leaning, not pacing, just present. Kendra tapped again on her device, still waiting on confirmation. "Gate. Passenger insists seat 2C. From the gate, Bryce Nolan responded, "Yeah, we're checking. Might be a system lag." Trevor finally sat in 2C like he'd won something. Elijah glanced down the jet bridge. He thought about turning around. He thought about letting it go. He'd done that before. In a lobby, at a hotel, at an awards banquet where someone asked him to bring water to their table. He was tired of letting it go. Still, he remained silent. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out his phone, pressed a number, waited. When the voice answered, he spoke clearly. "Engage Oversight code, flight SB 317, cabin 2C, timestamp now." Then he hung up. No raised voice, no scene, just a thread pulled back inside the cabin. Mateo Rivera, the junior attendant, watched from a few steps away. He had seen enough to know something wasn't right. But he wasn't senior staff, not his call. Passengers murmured again. Kendra turned, still holding Elijah's boarding pass. "I just need to verify with ground staff," she repeated. Elijah said nothing. She didn't return the pass. At that moment, no one on board realized what Elijah Mercer had just done. Not Trevor, not Kendra, not the captain, but in a control room across the country, in a building labeled Skybridge Holdings. A terminal blinked red. A soft chime sounded once, then again, then a third time. A line labeled Oversight Active. Mercer Authority lit up, and somewhere inside Skybridge HQ, a young analyst named Kara whispered to her supervisor, "I think Elijah Mercer just activated the clause." Kendra Lowell didn't understand why her hands were sweating. She'd handled far worse crying infants, drunk executives, turbulence at 35,000 feet. But something about this man, this quiet, still man, made her unsettled. He wasn't arguing. He wasn't challenging. That should have made things easier. Instead, it made her nervous. She clutched Elijah Mercer's boarding pass between her fingers as if it might dissolve. She checked it. Twice, it said 2C, business class. She had no solid reason to doubt it except her gut, and her gut told her that something didn't match. He just didn't look like the usual. The comms in her ear crackled. Still verifying, came Bryce's voice from the gate. Might be a sync delay from the manifest system. We're checking SkyTrack now. Kendra cleared her throat and turned her body slightly toward the front galley, where Elijah stood. He hadn't moved an inch since she asked him to step aside. No phone in hand now, no huffing, just him. Arms calmly at his sides, eyes still and unreadable. "Thank you for your patience," she said to him, her voice light. "Shouldn't be much longer." He didn't respond, not rudely, not even coldly, just silence. She hated it. She turned to Mateo, who was quietly restocking the coffee shelf behind her. "Hey," she whispered. "Did you notice anything strange about his boarding?" Mateo hesitated. "No," he said simply. "He boarded with Group 1, scanned clean, seemed normal." Kendra's lips tightened. She didn't want to say what she was thinking, and he didn't want to hear it, but the thought still lingered. What kind of man like him flies business class solo? No assistant, no tags, no suit, no laptop bag, just a notebook and a stare that went too far beneath the surface. She turned back toward the aisle, just in time to see Trevor Kane adjusting himself into seat 2C with a victorious grunt. He pulled out his phone and started typing quickly. The glow of the screen reflected smugness across his face. Entitled Much, he muttered, barely audible. Passengers across the row began to glance up from their devices. One woman frowned. A man with salt and pepper hair looked to the front, then down at his newspaper again, shifting uncomfortably. Elijah stayed in the galley. He wasn't leaning against the wall. He wasn't sighing. He wasn't checking his watch. He simply stood, as if he were watching time pass through him. Behind him, the jet bridge door had been closed. The cabin lights flickered slightly as the aircraft powered into its pre-departure cycle. But Kendra hadn't given the all-clear yet. Her comm buzzed again. "Bryce here. We're running the internal override tool. His ticket reads 2C in the app, but the sync on our end didn't register him on board. It's weird. Never seen this before." She frowned. "Could it be fraud silence?" "Doubtful," Bryce replied, "but maybe a back-end flag mismatch. I'll escalate to HQ just to cover it." Escalate. That word landed strangely at that moment. Mateo looked up from the coffee cart. "Kendra, do you remember his name?" She hesitated, flipping over the boarding pass. "Elijah Mercer." Mateo blinked. That name sounds familiar. Kendra waved it off. Probably a million Mercers out there. Still, something in her eyes flickered. She turned back toward the galley. Elijah was still standing there. She cleared her throat. "Mr. Mercer, I really appreciate your cooperation. Sometimes these things just take a moment to sort out." He finally moved. He reached inside his coat, retrieved a small notebook, the same one from before, and opened it without a word. He began writing, not aggressively, just small, neat script, his hand flowing smoothly across the page. Kendra blinked. "Are you documenting this?" He didn't answer. He didn't stop writing either. I'm just following procedure," she added quickly, voice suddenly too loud for the space. Still, no reply. From a few rows back, a girl in her 20s leaned forward in her seat, her phone tilted subtly in her palm, recording. The plane hadn't moved, but the cabin's atmosphere had shifted. It no longer felt like a delay. It felt like an error unfolding in real time, and no one wanted to be part of it. Back at the gate, Bryce's fingers flew over his tablet. He had just pulled up the secondary manifest tool when a red notification blinked at the top of his screen. Priority advisory. Hold on flight SB3117, do not depart. his brows furrowed. Attached was a string of data. Governance alert code, OCP Mercer active. Bryce sat back slowly in his chair. Wait, what the hell is OCP Mercer? He tapped for more details. A line appeared. Field Oversight Protocol activated. Executive level monitoring in progress. Passenger Elijah Mercer. Bryce dropped his stylus. Back on the plane. Mateo stepped quietly to Kendra's side. I think something's off, he said in a low voice. She gave him a sideways look. No kidding. No, he insisted. I mean, bigger than a seat assignment. I just saw a notification on my tablet. Flight delay initiated. Governance flag triggered. That's not normal. Kendra frowned. Her fingers tapped her device furiously. Then she saw it too. The same red advisory, OCP Mercer. Do not engage further until instructed. Her heart dropped. Mateo leaned in again. Kendra, what if he's someone important? She forced a laugh, too dry to hide her nerves. If he was that important, I would have known. Mateo didn't respond. He just looked toward the front of the plane, toward the man still calmly writing in his notebook. Trevor reclined in 2C, earphones in, oblivious. Passengers stayed quiet. Too quiet. And for the first time in years, Kendra Lowell realized her instincts might have led her straight into something she couldn't talk her way out of. She didn't know who Elijah Mercer really was, but she was about to find out. Elijah Mercer didn't pace. He didn't lean. He simply stood like a pillar someone forgot was load-bearing. The front galley of flight SB-3113 buzzed with the soft clicks of crew devices, the hiss of a warming kettle, the distant sounds of overhead bins slamming shut behind him. But he stood still. Passengers entering the plane paused as they passed. Some looked confused. Others noticed something off, though they couldn't place it. Most didn't speak. Kendra Lowell paced. Her fingers fluttered against the tablet in her hand, trying to navigate a system that now refused to obey. Every time she attempted to process a cabin manifest update, it denied access. Governance override active. What did that even mean? She tapped again. The same banner flashed red. Do not engage passenger 2C, pending executive clearance. She didn't understand. Mateo Rivera watched quietly from his spot by the galley door. He could see it. The tension in Kendra's jaw. The way her smile had disappeared and been replaced by something else. Not guilt. Not yet. Fear. It was subtle, but creeping in fast. He wanted to ask if she needed help, but he didn't know how to phrase it. So instead, he just checked his own device again. The red banner was there. 2. Do not engage. Inside the cabin. The murmur had grown. Passengers noticed Trevor Kane, reclined in seat 2C, sipping water from a glass like he belonged there. He had taken his shoes off, one foot tapping as if he'd earned the space. 2 rows behind him, a middle-aged woman whispered to her husband, "That's not his seat." "Is it? I don't think so. Wasn't there someone else there earlier?" The husband shrugged but kept his eyes on the front of the cabin. In seat 3D, a teenage girl watched through the gap between the seats in front of her. She opened her TikTok app and hit record. No narration. Just her phone camera slowly capturing the image of a calm, black man standing near the front of a plane, notebook in hand, completely still. She typed a short caption, "He hasn't said a word," and they made him give up his seat. Then she hit post, back in the galley. Elijah closed the notebook. He didn't speak, but he did finally move. He placed the notebook carefully back into the side pocket of his leather bag. Then he reached inside again, slowly, and pulled out a small card wallet. From it, he removed a sleek black card. It bore no bank logo, no airline insignia, no frequent flyer label, just a silver crest etched into the center, and his initials AM. Mateo saw it. His eyes widened slightly. He knew that symbol. Not from any airline. From a quarterly training seminar last year, it was the Internal Governance Board's emblem, the one used during high-level inspections, the kind cabin crew were warned about but rarely saw in real life. He nudged Kendra slightly. I think that's one of our board-level tags. Kendra barely glanced. Board level, from whom Mateo lowered his voice. Skybridge Holdings. That's not a loyalty card. That's internal governance. Kendra's lips parted, but no sound came. She looked again at Elijah, then down at her own device, then back again. Elijah Mercer placed the card back in his wallet and returned it to his coat pocket. Then he stood again in that same patient silence. Eyes on nothing in particular. Kendra's comm buzzed. Bryce Nolan's voice came through, rushed and strained. We've got a situation. HQ just pinged us. There's an internal hold on the flight. Executive-level compliance alert. They're saying his name's Elijah Mercer. Kendra's stomach dropped. She turned fully toward the front. Mateo stepped slightly aside to let her pass. She approached Elijah with cautious steps. Sir, she said quietly, would you be willing to speak with our gate supervisor? He's been asked to meet you at the terminal door. Elijah turned to her, his face unreadable, only for a moment. Then he gave a slight nod. Mateo opened the front door to the jet bridge. Kendra followed Elijah as he stepped out, one calm stride at a time. In the cabin, the silence deepened. Trevor looked around, confused. Where's that guy going? Wasn't he in 2C? No one answered him. A woman in 5A turned to the window, her expression tense. Two young business travelers exchanged glances and shook their heads. What's going on? Something big? Look at the crew. They're rattled, in the galley. Mateo watched Kendra disappear down the jet bridge behind Elijah. Then he opened his crew portal again and typed one word into the search bar. Mercer. 3 entries came up. One stood out, Elijah D. Mercer. Board chair. Equity Oversight. Skybridge Holdings. Mateo blinked. His hands dropped to his sides. Oh no. Passengers kept watching the front of the plane, though no one dared speak up. The girl in 3D checked her phone again. Her video had already reached 4,000 views. One comment read, "That man's not a passenger. He's the owner." Back on the jet bridge. Kendra tried to keep pace with Elijah. She wanted to speak. She really did. To apologize, to explain, to excuse, to undo. But what could she say he hadn't yelled? He hadn't protested. And yet, somehow, he had pulled the whole aircraft into silence. Bryce Nolan waited at the end of the corridor, holding a tablet, face pale. He looked up as Elijah approached. Mr. Mercer, I wasn't informed you were traveling with us today. Elijah simply looked at him. Today wasn't about being informed. Mr. Nolan, it was about being observed. He passed without another word. Bryce turned to Kendra. Panic rising. What did you do? She couldn't answer. The door to the jet bridge hissed closed behind Elijah Mercer. He did not speak. He did not stop. He walked past Bryce Nolan with the same rhythm he'd had boarding the plane, like nothing had changed. Like everything had. Kendra Lowell stood frozen. Her mouth was dry. Her fingers hovered over the tablet in her hand like they no longer remembered how to move. She wanted to open her mouth, say something, fix something, but she didn't even know what the damage was yet, and that terrified her more than any turbulence ever could. Elijah continued walking, not hurried, not hesitant, measured, composed. Terminal C at Denver International wasn't especially crowded that morning, but heads still turned, not because anyone recognized him, but because of the weight he carried in his silence. There are people whose presence demands attention through volume. Then there are those who command a room by doing nothing at all. Elijah Mercer was the latter. He stopped near a large window facing the runway. He placed his bag down gently. He didn't sit. Instead, he took out his phone. Not the personal one. The other, the one that rarely left the inner lining of his coat, matte black, no branding. He unlocked it with a single swipe. One number, one call. It connected instantly. "Yes," said the voice on the other end. Elijah's voice was quiet. "Begin Mercer Protocol. Passenger Oversight. Flight SB317. Confirmed timestamp. Cabin 2C. Understood." He ended the call. There was no reaction, no blinking, no breath of anger. He simply slid the phone back into his coat and turned to the window. Back inside the cabin, Mateo Rivera stood near the front curtain, unsure of what to do. Kendra had not returned. The front door remained closed. Trevor Kane was now glancing toward the aisle repeatedly, annoyed that no flight attendants had offered him a drink yet. Passengers were whispering again. "That guy they moved out of 2C. Where is he? Wasn't he supposed to be in that seat? I think I saw something about it on TikTok." The teenage girl in 3D was refreshing her screen. Her original video had hit nearly 10,000 views. The comment section was filling with questions. Who is he? Why did the crew act like that? Is he someone important? Her follow-up video showed only a still shot of the boarding pass. It was blurry, but clear enough to read the name Elijah Mercer. Back in the terminal, a staff member approached Elijah. "Sir, the North Executive Lounge is available if you'd prefer." He raised one hand gently. "No, thank you." The staffer nodded and retreated. Elijah remained by the window. He watched a plane lift off in the distance, then another, all while the one he had just exited sat still, locked in a freeze that no one fully understood yet. Bryce was back on a call near the check-in desk. His voice was hushed. "We're getting strange messages from HQ. Someone named Mercer triggered a governance protocol. I don't know what that means, but it's locking our systems." From the other end came only 2 words. Not someone. The Mercer. Bryce blinked. "What do you mean? Elijah Mercer is a board-level asset holder. Skybridge Holdings. Equity chair. He built the protocol they're flagging right now. You're telling me he's not a VIP. He's the person VIPs answer to." Bryce felt his knees weaken slightly. Inside the cockpit, the captain had just received the same alert. He looked at the co-pilot, who stared at the tablet screen in front of them. "Captain, the system's grounded us. Y governance flag, Mercer protocol, live." The captain rubbed his temples. "Who the hell is Mercer?" The co-pilot turned the tablet around. The screen displayed a photo from the corporate board listing. Name, Elijah D. Mercer Position Equity Oversight Chair Entity Skybridge Holdings Voting Authority Active Protocol Authorship Clause 7 Passenger Dignity Enforcement. The captain leaned back. This isn't a customer service issue anymore. Is it? No, sir. This is a full-blown audit. Kendra finally returned to the galley. She walked like someone coming down from a great height without knowing how far the drop was. Mateo looked up. Did he say anything? No. What did he do? Kendra stared ahead. He made a call, and then everything stopped. Mateo swallowed. I checked the governance portal. He's on the board. He wrote the dignity clause. Kendra didn't speak. A voice came over her tablet. Attention, immediate flight, freeze. Subject SB317. Do not engage passenger 2C. Internal review in progress. Await Mercer directive. Kendra read it twice, then a third time. She sat down on the jump seat, hands trembling. Passengers continued whispering. TikTok videos about the man in 2C were now spreading across Instagram and X. Commentators were asking, why did he have to prove he belonged? Why didn't anyone check before asking him to move? And why did he stay so quiet? Because he didn't need to raise his voice. He raised the system instead. In the corner of the terminal. Elijah checked his watch. A simple vintage piece, no digital glow, no branding, just gold and time. He didn't smile. He didn't scowl. He waited, and somehow, without saying a word to anyone in the terminal, he had made the ground beneath the airline shift. His phone buzzed once in his pocket. New message, governance, live status clause, 7 under review, legal standby initiated, video evidence acquired. He turned off the screen without replying. Somewhere back on the aircraft, Mateo stood frozen beside the curtain. What now? He asked quietly. No one answered, because they all knew nothing was going to be the same again. The cabin of flight, SB317, remained eerily still. Passengers shifted in their seats but spoke in hushed tones, their eyes drawn repeatedly to the front, where the galley curtain separated them from the unknown. Elijah Mercer's seat sat empty now, but the space it occupied felt heavier than any passenger could fill. The tension was thick, a quiet storm rolling through the rows. Mateo Rivera lingered by the galley door, eyes scanning faces and devices alike. The murmurs had grown into whispers and then settled into a silence so complete it felt like a presence itself. Kendra Lowell sat alone in the jump seat, her fingers trembling as she stared down at her tablet. Every alert, every advisory was a reminder of the mistake she had made or the system failure she couldn't yet understand. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We are currently under a governance hold pending executive clearance. We apologize for the delay and will update you as soon as possible. The announcement was calm, professional, but the effect was palpable. No one groaned. No one asked for explanations. They all knew. In 3A, Mrs. Thelma Johns, a retired school principal, folded her hands in her lap and closed her eyes briefly. She had seen too many things like this in her lifetime, too many doors closed, too many moments lost to quiet prejudice. Her gaze opened and fixed on the curtain. Behind it, a man was waiting, not just any man, a man who had been wronged in silence. Mateo approached her gently. Mrs. Johns, he asked softly. She nodded. Do you mind if I sit here for a moment? She smiled faintly. No, please. Mateo sat and glanced toward the front. He felt a strange mix of anxiety and hope. The young woman with the phone was still filming, but now the video had shifted. It wasn't just a record of injustice anymore. It was becoming a symbol, a silent statement that something needed to change. Elijah Mercer sat in the North Executive Lounge, a space designed to feel calm and removed from chaos. No music, no chatter, only the soft hum of air conditioning and the distant murmur of a TV in the corner. He folded his hands on the table in front of him and stared at a folder, black leather, embossed with the silver crest of Skybridge Holdings. Inside was a report, his report, field violation assessment, preliminary findings, classification class 1, governance trigger. He knew what that meant. He knew what was coming. But there was no anger in his eyes, only resolve. Back on the plane, passengers were scrolling through social feeds. Comments flew in rapid fire. They spoke of the calm in the storm, the dignity in silence, the power of presence. In row 2B, a businessman who had been silently watching nodded slowly. He knew the name Mercer. Everyone did, not as a celebrity, not as a public figure, but as a man who built systems designed to protect those like him, to ensure dignity was more than a word. Mateo glanced at his watch. Minutes were passing, but no one moved. The usual rustle of safety cards, the shuffle of feet, the impatient tapping of tablets all gone. The plane was frozen in time. Kendra's fingers twitched. She knew she would never forget this moment. Not the embarrassment, not the humiliation, but the quiet lesson, the weight of stillness. She looked down at her tablet again. A new notification blinked. Immediate dismissal recommended. Clause 7 violation, bias and dignity breach. Kendra swallowed hard. Her world was changing. Elijah Mercer wasn't just a passenger, he was a reckoning. And that reckoning was sitting just beyond the curtain, in the terminal. Bryce Nolan stood with his phone pressed to his ear. Yes, ma'am, I understand. The executive has taken personal oversight. We are holding the flight indefinitely. He paused, listening. Yes, we've alerted legal. They're preparing documentation as we speak. He lowered the phone and looked toward the plane. The silence was no longer empty. It was full of consequences, full of questions, and full of something new. Hope. The captain's voice came again. Ladies and gentlemen, we are still under a governance hold. We appreciate your patience and cooperation. A small boy in 4C tugged on his mother's sleeve. Mom, why can't the plane take off? She smiled gently and kissed his forehead, because sometimes the right thing takes time. Elijah Mercer sat in the lounge and folded the report. No calls, no interviews, just quiet strength. At the corporate headquarters of Skybridge Holdings, deep in Arlington, the atmosphere was electric and tense. In a sleek conference room, walls lined with glass and muted wood, a handful of executives and legal counsel gathered around a long table. The screen at the front displayed the airline's real-time operational dashboard. On it flashed a critical alert: Flight SB317 hold status active, passenger oversight engaged. Tyra Fenwick, the senior legal advisor, tapped her pen against the polished surface. Her eyes flicked to the face of Elijah Mercer on a corporate directory. Elijah Mercer, she said, voice low but clear. Founding partner and chair of the Equity Oversight Committee. The CEO of Skybridge, Joanna Reed, nodded slowly. He's the architect of the very governance protocols that are now shutting down one of our own flights, Joanna added, her tone tight. Tyra pulled up a document labeled Clause 7 Passenger Dignity and Bias Enforcement. This clause was written specifically to protect passengers from discrimination and uphold their dignity. Tyra explained. Elijah Mercer helped draft it. He pushed for it after multiple incidents were reported over the years. Joanna sighed. And now he's on board flight SB-317 and somehow the crew failed to recognize him. That's an understatement, said Marcus Lee, the director of operations. Lead flight attendant Lowell challenged him outright, ignoring his credentials. That's exactly the kind of behavior Clause 7 aims to prevent. Tyra looked over to the operations team. What's the status? From the gate, Bryce Nolan's face appeared on a video feed. We're holding the flight indefinitely, Bryce said, clearly stressed. HQ Legal has issued a freeze order. All crew have been instructed not to engage passenger 2C. Joanna leaned forward. We need to handle this delicately. Mercer's involvement means this isn't just a customer complaint. It's a governance audit, live. Marcus exhaled. Exactly. The implications are huge. If the footage of this incident leaks, and it already has, we risk massive public backlash. Tyra nodded. We already have social media buzz. Videos from passengers are spreading rapidly. On screen, clips showed Elijah quietly standing in the galley, the boarding pass incident, and the hesitant actions of the crew. Joanna ran a hand through her hair. We have to make sure the response is airtight. Mercer isn't interested in apologies or PR stunts. He wants accountability. Tyra opened another file on her laptop. Clause 7 includes immediate disciplinary measures for conduct that violates passenger dignity. That means Lowell could be terminated on the spot. Marcus swallowed hard. Then we proceed with the HR process. But the question is, how do we communicate this internally and externally? Joanna looked grim. Don't make this a witch hunt. We need a clear message about our commitment to equity and respect. Mercer's Oversight Committee will be driving that. Tyra tapped the screen. There's also a training overhaul scheduled. Mandatory civil rights passenger curriculum for all cabin leads. Deadline 30 days from now. Joanna nodded again. That's good. We need to be proactive. Tyra's gaze drifted to the live feed again. Elijah Mercer isn't just a passenger on SB-317. He's the reason this clause exists, and now he's here to enforce it. Marcus shook his head. He's not angry. He's calm, but that calm carries more weight than any shouted protest. Joanna pressed a button. Pull up the latest manifest logs. Cross-reference Mercer's equity stake with airline ownership. Tyra's fingers danced over the keyboard. 31%. She reported. Voting control clause activated since last year. Mercer Holdings has a controlling interest in Skybridge. Joanna exhaled. Then, this isn't just enforcement, it's a power play. Tyra shook her head. No, it's justice. The kind we haven't seen enough of. At the same time, back on flight SB-317, Mateo Rivera glanced toward the galley curtain again. Kendra Lowell sat silently, eyes fixed on the tablet that now showed a live feed of the corporate response. She swallowed hard, realizing the gravity of the situation. Mateo leaned closer. Did you know who he was before this? She shook her head. No. And now I'm terrified I never really saw him at all. The plane remained still. The passengers watched, and somewhere, far from the hum of engines and the buzz of conversations, a quiet reckoning was underway. Kendra Lowell's hands trembled as she stared at the tablet screen. The message was clear. Do not engage passenger 2C. Board oversight in progress. Governance freeze active. She read it again and again. Her mind raced, but her voice caught in her throat. Mateo Rivera looked over, concern etched in his features. What's happening? Kendra. She swallowed hard and whispered, He's not just a passenger. Mateo's eyebrows rose. What do you mean? He's part of the board. The governance board. He wrote the very clause that protects passengers like him. Mateo blinked. That explains the freeze. But why didn't we know? Mateo asked. Kendra shook her head. We weren't informed. If we had been, this wouldn't have happened. The cabin was tense. Passengers whispered among themselves. The teenage girl's TikTok livestream now had thousands of viewers. Comments poured in. Some praised Elijah's calm. Others condemned the crew's actions. Back in the galley, Kendra tried to steady herself. She glanced toward the curtain behind which Elijah sat, or rather, where his seat sat empty. Her phone buzzed again. An incoming video from HQ. It showed the gate interaction, the boarding pass exchange, the silent phone call. She watched, the knot in her stomach tightening. Outside the plane, Bryce Nolan paced. His phone rang again. Yes, ma'am. I'm coordinating the immediate personnel review. Lead cabin attendant. Lowell is the primary subject. His face paled. We're preparing documentation for disciplinary action, possible termination. He sighed. I never thought a seating mix-up would lead here. Back inside the plane. Mateo stood near the curtain. His eyes met Kendra's. We need to be honest with the passengers. She nodded slowly, but how the situation is still unfolding. Mateo looked toward the cabin. Passengers were restless but restrained. A middle-aged man leaned toward his wife. This is more than a delay. It's a statement, she replied quietly. Elijah's name was now trending on social media. News outlets were picking up the story. A wave of public support began to swell. In the terminal lounge, Elijah opened his leather folder. Inside were reports, lists, logs, evidence compiled over months of oversight. He tapped the top sheet. Bias and dignity breaches. He spoke softly, almost to himself. This isn't personal. It's structural. Back on the plane, Kendra's tablet buzzed. Another message. Immediate dismissal recommended. Clause 7 violation confirmed. Her breath hitched. She sank into the jump seat, unable to look away from the screen. Mateo sat beside her. This is bigger than us, he said. She nodded, and it's just beginning, outside. The captain appeared at the galley door. Everyone, please remain seated. We await further instructions from operations. His voice was calm but firm. No one moved. No one spoke. The weight of stillness pressed down on the cabin. In 3C, Mrs. Thelma Johns folded her hands. She looked toward the curtain. Her eyes filled with quiet pride. She's right, she whispered to no one in particular. That seat belongs to him, and to all of us. The cabin, seat 2C, sat empty. The leather cushion bore no weight, yet the space seemed to command the attention of every passenger aboard flight SB 317. Passengers shifted in their seats, some glancing repeatedly at the vacant chair as if expecting Elijah Mercer to return at any moment. But he had stepped off the plane, and silence followed in his wake. No announcements filled the cabin. No apologies echoed down the aisles. Only the faint hum of the aircraft systems and the soft rustling of papers. The teenage girl in 3D had stopped recording, but her video had already gone viral. Comments poured in from viewers across the country. How can someone so calm face that and not explode? He's rewriting the rules without saying a word. Who is he? Why did they treat him like he didn't belong? Meanwhile, the man in 2B, a sharply dressed businessman, sat staring straight ahead. His face was unreadable, but his eyes betrayed a mixture of respect and concern. In 5A, Mrs. Thelma Johns clasped her hands tightly. She was silent, but her expression spoke volumes, a mixture of sorrow and hope. Mateo Rivera lingered near the galley, his eyes darting between Kendra Lowell and the empty seat. Kendra sat motionless, staring at her tablet, the weight of what had transpired crushing down on her. The minutes dragged by. Outside the plane, at the gate, a young employee named Josh returned from a coffee run. He noticed Elijah Mercer standing by the terminal entrance. Elijah's posture was upright, calm, dignified. Josh didn't recognize the man but felt an instinctive respect and nodded politely as he passed. Elijah acknowledged the gesture with a subtle nod. Back inside the terminal, a group of Skybridge executives gathered in a locked conference room. Joanna Reed, the CEO, sat at the head of the table, her expression grim. "Prepare the official notice," she instructed. "We need to act fast and decisively." Tyra Fenwick, senior legal advisor, nodded. "We're initiating immediate suspension and review of lead flight attendant Lowell. All documentation is ready." Marcus Lee, director of operations, sighed. "This is unprecedented. The whole industry is watching." Joanna's eyes narrowed. "Then we make sure they see accountability." Meanwhile, in the North Executive Lounge, Elijah Mercer opened his briefcase. Inside lay a folder embossed with the Skybridge Holdings crest. He pulled out a report labeled Field Failure Assessment. The pages detailed violations of dignity and governance protocol. His finger traced the words Bias Incident Flight SB317. He folded the folder carefully, resting his hands on it. No anger, no resentment, just quiet resolve. Back on the plane, passengers exchanged glances. A woman in 4C whispered to her son, "That man just changed the game." Her son looked up, eyes wide. "How by sitting still and being himself," she said softly. The captain's voice came over the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are awaiting final clearance to depart. We appreciate your patience and understanding." No one responded. No one groaned. The silence was heavy with meaning. A young businesswoman checked her phone. The trending hashtag "Our Chair Not Denied" was exploding across social platforms. One comment read, "Dignity is the quiet power no one can take away." In the cabin, Mateo finally broke the silence. "This is bigger than any of us." Kendra nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I never thought I'd be part of something like this." Mrs. Thelma Johns looked toward the front. Her voice was barely audible. He didn't have to fight loud. He fought smart. The empty seat in 2C wasn't just an absence. It was a statement, one that would be remembered long after the plane took off. Elijah Mercer sat alone in the North Executive Lounge, the soft lighting casting a warm glow on the leather chairs around him. The quiet hum of the air conditioning was the only sound accompanying his steady breathing. His eyes rested on a sleek black folder embossed with the Skybridge Holdings crest resting on the table before him. The folder contained reports detailed, meticulous reports compiled over months documenting incidents of bias, dignity breaches, and governance failures across Skybridge's operations. Flight SB3117 was now just the latest case. Elijah slid the folder open. The pages beneath his fingertips bore the title Field Violation Assessment, Passenger Dignity and Bias Breach. The classification marked it as a Class 1 violation, triggering immediate oversight protocols. His fingers traced the words, but his mind was already ahead, considering the next steps. This wasn't about revenge. It was about responsibility, accountability, a chance to reshape a system too slow to recognize its own failings. Across the country, in the company's headquarters, a conference room was buzzing with urgent activity. Joanna Reed, Skybridge's CEO, presided over the meeting, flanked by legal counsel and operations directors. "We've never seen a real-time governance intervention like this before," Joanna said, her voice steady but tense. "Mercer's involvement complicates everything." Tyra Fenwick, the senior legal advisor, nodded. "Clause 7 isn't just symbolic, it's enforceable. It mandates immediate disciplinary action for conduct that harms passenger dignity." Marcus Lee, Director of Operations, leaned forward. "Lead flight attendant Lowell is the primary subject. We have video evidence and eyewitness reports. The social media fallout is escalating rapidly." Joanna sighed. "Prepare the suspension paperwork. We need a clear, unified message. No excuses, no delays." Back on flight SB 317, Mateo Rivera sat near the galley, watching Kendra Lowell as she silently reviewed the situation. The weight of what had transpired was settling in. "I don't think she expected any of this," Mateo whispered. "She thought it was a simple misunderstanding." Kendra's gaze met his. "I was wrong. We all were." The cabin was still, the usual pre-flight buzz replaced by a palpable tension. Passengers checked their phones, scrolling through updates and reactions online. In seat 3A, Mrs. Thelma Johns leaned forward. Her voice was soft but firm. "This isn't just about one man or one flight. It's about dignity, respect, and the way we treat each other." A young mother beside her nodded. "He didn't need to shout or fight. He showed us another way." Mateo glanced back toward the galley. Elijah's empty seat was a constant reminder of the cost of silence and the power of presence. Meanwhile, back in the lounge, Elijah picked up his phone. His fingers typed out a message: "Initiate new training protocols, civil rights passenger curriculum, deadline 30 days. He sent it without hesitation. This was just the beginning. The chair was not his to deny. It belonged to everyone. Kendra Lowell sat stiffly in the beige-walled conference room of Terminal C. The hum of fluorescent lights above filled the space with an artificial chill. Across from her sat Elijah Mercer, calm and composed, his presence commanding even in this sterile setting. Flanked by two company executives, Joanna Reed and Marcus Lee, Kendra felt the weight of their scrutiny. Joanna opened a black folder and slid a thick report across the table. "This document details the events on Flight SB 317, Joanna began. Voice measured. Your decision to question Mr. Mercer's seat assignment, despite his valid credentials, has triggered a serious governance investigation." Kendra swallowed. "I was following protocol." Elijah's gaze met hers steadily. "Protocol does not excuse prejudice." She looked away. Marcus spoke next. "This investigation is not about individual blame alone, but systemic failure. Lead flight attendant Lowell, your actions violated Clause 7 passenger dignity and bias enforcement." Kendra's throat tightened. Elijah continued, voice quiet but firm. "I'm not here to demand apologies. I'm here to ensure this never happens again." Joanna leaned forward. "We are prepared to begin disciplinary proceedings. Suspension is effective immediately pending further review." Kendra's hands clenched in her lap. Mateo Rivera sat quietly in the corner, observing, conflicted. He had watched the entire ordeal unfold and had always admired Kendra as a professional. But now, he saw the consequences of blind assumptions. Kendra broke the silence. "I want to learn. I want to change. Elijah nodded slightly. That is the first step. Joanna tapped her pen. This incident has sparked widespread public attention. We must show the world that Skybridge America is committed to equity and respect. Outside the conference room, Josh, the airport employee, stood nearby. He overheard fragments of the discussion and shook his head. This is bigger than a seating dispute, he muttered. Inside, the meeting continued. Joanna asked Elijah, "What are your recommendations?" Elijah pulled out a tablet. Mandatory civil rights training for all cabin crew, emphasizing unconscious bias and passenger dignity. A new escalation protocol that prevents this from happening again. And real-time oversight measures to ensure compliance. Marcus nodded. We'll prepare the implementation plan immediately. Kendra looked up. Will there be support for those of us who need to change? Elijah smiled softly. Support and accountability go hand in hand. Change is not optional anymore. The room fell silent for a moment. Outside, the hum of the airport carried on, indifferent to the quiet revolution unfolding within. Kendra Lowell rose. I accept the consequences. Elijah stood as well. We will all be better for it. Joanna closed the folder. This hearing is adjourned. As Kendra left the room, Mateo caught her eye. We'll get through this, he said. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Thank you. The first few days after the incident on Flight SB-317 passed like a whirlwind through Skybridge America's headquarters and airports nationwide. The story of Elijah Mercer's quiet but firm response spread quickly, reshaping conversations about race, dignity, and accountability in corporate America. Mateo Rivera sat in the crew briefing room, scrolling through the new mandatory training curriculum on his tablet. The syllabus was comprehensive, covering unconscious bias, conflict de-escalation, passenger dignity, and real-world scenarios inspired by recent events. Every lead flight attendant was required to complete the course within 30 days. Kendra Lowell was among the first to sign up. She had spent the previous week reflecting deeply on her actions and their impact. The weight of public scrutiny pressed on her, but there was also a glimmer of hope in her heart that she could truly change. In a corner of Terminal C, Mrs. Thelma Johns watched the news unfold. She saw the stories, online videos, articles, social media posts highlighting the incident. She smiled softly, remembering the quiet strength Elijah showed that day. Elijah Mercer returned to Flight SB-317, not as a passenger, but as a symbol of change. This time, he took seat 2C once again, but the difference was palpable. The cabin welcomed him with a new energy respect that needed no announcement. Mateo noticed the subtle nods exchanged between passengers. The usual hustle of preparing for takeoff had been replaced by a collective awareness, a shared understanding that something important had shifted. Mrs. Johns reached out and gently squeezed Elijah's hand as he passed by her seat. Their eyes met, and in that brief moment, no words were needed. It was a gesture filled with history, respect, and unspoken solidarity. Elijah settled into his seat, opened his notebook, and began writing again. But this time, the words flowed with renewed purpose drafts of training modules, notes for new policies, and ideas for continued oversight. Joanna Reed watched from the operations center, monitoring live feeds from flights across the country. She saw the shift not just in protocols, but in attitudes. Skybridge America was becoming a leader in passenger rights and equity training, setting a new standard for the industry. Marcus Lee approached her desk, his face reflecting cautious optimism. The training modules are getting strong feedback, cabin leads report better communication, fewer conflicts. Joanna nodded. It's a start, but we have to stay vigilant. At the same time, Mateo sat beside Kendra in a quiet lounge. We're not just learning new procedures, he said quietly. We're changing the culture. Kendra looked out the window, eyes thoughtful. I want to be part of that change. As the plane finally lifted off from Denver, passengers watched out their windows, some wiping away tears, others exchanging smiles. The flight was more than a journey from one city to another. It was a passage towards something better. Back in his Harlem brownstone, Elijah Mercer set down his pen and closed his notebook. The evening light filtered through the window, casting long shadows on the walls. He poured himself a glass of tea and sat by the window, watching children play in the street below. No headlines, no speeches, just quiet dignity. Legacy, he thought, wasn't about making noise. It was about making sure the rules changed long after you were gone. Elijah Mercer settled back into seat 2C with the quiet confidence of a man who knew his place was not just earned, but rightful. The leather of the seat molded beneath him, familiar and steady, as the aircraft prepared to taxi. Passengers around him whispered softly, exchanging knowing glances. The woman in 3A smiled gently, clutching a small prayer bracelet around her wrist. She caught Elijah's eye, nodding with a look that conveyed shared history, resilience, and respect. The captain's voice came over the intercom, clear and steady. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now cleared for takeoff. Thank you for your patience. Elijah gazed out the window, the city lights of Denver fading behind the plane as it accelerated down the runway. The engines roared, but inside, a profound stillness remained. On the screen of a young woman's phone, the hashtag #CoshChairNotDenied was trending. Comments flooded in. He didn't need to yell. He didn't need to fight. He changed the rules without saying a word. He reminded us what dignity looks like. Elijah's mind drifted briefly to the young boy seated a few rows behind, who watched him with wide eyes. As the plane climbed into the sky, Elijah caught the boy's gaze and offered a small nod. Later, as they deplaned in Washington, D.C., the boy tugged at his mother's hand. "Mom, is that man famous?" She smiled, kneeling to his level. "No, baby, he's something better." Elijah caught the exchange from a distance and smiled softly. Before he disappeared into the terminal, he paused. He crouched down slightly, lowering himself to the boy's eye level. "Don't let uniforms fool you, son," he said gently. "Not theirs, not yours." The boy nodded seriously. Elijah straightened, walking with measured steps toward the waiting car. The evening breeze tugged at his coat, carrying the faint hum of the city behind him. He climbed in without looking back. There were no cameras, no headlines, no speeches, just the quiet certainty that the chair was never theirs to deny. At home. Elijah placed his leather folder back onto the shelf. He poured a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the world outside. Legacy, he thought, isn't about noise or spectacle. It's about the rules you set that others have no choice but to follow. And for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself a breath. Not as a chairman, not as a CEO, just as a man who was finally seen. Elijah Mercer didn't just reclaim a seat on that flight. He reclaimed the dignity that belongs to every person regardless of the assumptions others make. His calm strength reminded us that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply waits patiently until it's noticed. But Elijah's story also shines a harsh light on the painful reality of racial bias and discrimination that still exists, even in places as routine as an airplane seat. It calls us to reflect, to confront our own biases, and to demand better not just for ourselves, but for everyone. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own struggles or those of someone you love, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with your friends and family so they too can hear this message of quiet resilience. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We have many more stories coming that will touch your heart and challenge the world. Thank you for watching. Stay strong, stay seen, and remember your presence is never a mistake, and your dignity is never up for debate.